Hello, hello. How was lunch? Who heard my voice squeak there? That's the real question. I just want to say before we get going, lunch was incredible. How about a big round of applause to the Lord Elgin Hotel? Woo! All right. Before we begin with the panel, I was going to obviously touch on a little bit about my story and speak to the video a bit and to where I'm at in my life and how this is all how this all happened. So again, my name is Mark Demontis, and as I spoke about earlier, I was affected when I was 17, and being a teenager can be a tough time. But being diagnosed by LHON at any point in your life can be a tough time because, let's face it, when the doctor says to you, you're being diagnosed with Leber hereditary optic neuropathy, you're like, come on, doc, what does that even mean here, right? But over time, you seem to find a way of finding hope around it. I was very fortunate to have a great family, great group of friends, and great community support. But there was something I was ultimately missing in my life for a number of years after I was diagnosed with LHON, and that was the fact that I had never met anyone else with LHON. And man, I tell you, the feeling, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about the feeling you get knowing that you're not alone, and the feeling you get knowing there's someone else out there who deals with exactly what you deal with day to day, from a physical perspective, from an emotional perspective. I mean, that's truly what this is all about. And to me, that's really why we want to ensure that we start LHON Canada, is because we don't want to leave anyone behind. We want to be able to build this community to a point where, our LHON brothers and sisters always know there's someone there that you can give a call to or lean on in case you need support in any way in your life. There was a lot of late nights. I'm not going to lie to you. There were a lot of late nights that were tough. I remember nights laying in bed, tears going down my face, and why me? Why me? That's at 17. It's tough. And one of the toughest parts was how tough my parents were taking it. I mean, my mother and my father, the guilt that my mother had as well, feeling it was all her fault. And I think one of the biggest things that what happened with our family was, in many ways, it made us closer. It made us stronger. It made us realize that there's something more to life than just eyesight. And that's when I found out about blind hockey. I was told after I lost my sight that my chances of playing college hockey were done, and I found out about a local blind hockey team in Toronto, the Ice Owls. It took me on a mission across Canada to raise funds and awareness for blind hockey programs, and I can tell you I'm 31 now, and LHON is the reason that is taking me everywhere in my life, from building nonprofit organizations to hosting national television to everywhere it's brought me has been a result of this diagnosis. In many ways, it's been a blessing in disguise. And so I'm 31 now. What am I doing? I just finished running in the Ontario election. I just finished... So not only running the Ontario election, but I was just named to Canada's national blind hockey team. So representing the red and white now for Canada, which is... I don't know, but I know a lot of other people that don't have LHON that aren't representing Canada, so I think that's pretty cool. Life can take you in the most amazing places, and you can meet the most amazing people. But the one biggest advice I give to everyone here today who's maybe meeting someone for their first time or getting the opportunity to learn more about LHON is just take a deep breath, give it a chance. I didn't pay attention to any research for a long time. I know Lissa spoke about a time when she had called me regarding LHON and everything, and it just wasn't something for me that I had that much interest in my life. It was like, this is a medical condition. The likelihood of me getting my sight back I thought was going to be tough. What was the point of me having this much passion for something then? And I realized it's not so much about the eye condition that is impactful here. It's about the impact you can have on those around you. And so today, one of the calls to action later in the day we're going to go over is how we're going to reach out to those in our own communities who are affected and the role we can play locally. Neighbor to neighbor, community to community, and how we can help people. So for me, I am honored that I get to be the moderator. The reason I was told I could moderate was that I was easier, that I didn't have to speak. So I said, well, I'll speak and moderate then, so you get both of me. But we have quite a panel coming up today, and I was going to call everyone up one at a time because it's tough to tell your story. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been telling my story for a while now. I have no issue sharing the tough times, no issue sharing the highlights. For others, maybe it's a different situation. So I figure we'd call up one at a time, and let's give them like a really big round of applause. But first, before we do that, I have to do one last thing. I have to introduce two folks that are here. From two of our community partner groups across the country. Brian McLean is here from Achilles Canada. Brian, are you in the room? Yeah, there you are. Perfect. So, anything Achilles Canada, which is a national running organization for those who are blind and partially sighted, be sure to speak with our good friend Brian McLean, who also plays blind hockey as well. And as well, Matt Morrow is here from Canadian Blind Hockey. So we sure to... Matt's the big guy, and I'm glad he's sighted. Or else it'd be tough collisions out there. So if anyone has any, regarding sports, we're going to hear from Jason Dunkerley later. But I wanted to point out Brian McLean and Matt Morrow, who are here, and now to our panel. All right. So who do we call up first? Let's call up our good friend Ida Davis. Woo! All right, and how about we call up Fay Knights? And the last person I'm going to call up is someone I had the pleasure of meeting last year in Alexandria, Virginia. I know his speech had a big impact on my life, and maybe because he's also a guy, but in general, he's a great speaker, and he's also Canadian, even though he's south of the border. He's once a Canadian, always a Canadian, eh? So, John Knox. All right, we pull in straws, rock, paper, scissors. Who's going first? What are we doing here? Kevin, do we have an order? Sorry. John? John, you're leading off. John, you good with that?
Sure.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, John Knox.
Boy, that's a lot of stuff to follow there. And I think, Mark, you hit on a few of the themes. So, first of all, I know it's been covered a few times today by a number of people, but first I want to say my own thanks, and I think a lot of you will share this, to Kevin's family. I met about 100 Cotés last night. Gilles, Pat, Andre, who helped with the hotel, and of course Estelle and Alistair Taylor, and all the people who made this happen. And Dr. Kranjai mentioned, I think the planning didn't really even start till under a year ago. So really amazing to have all these people in the room. So thank you to everybody. But I think this has already been covered several times, and I'm going to make Lissa blush one more time. But I don't think anybody in this room would be here if it weren't for Lissa, and certainly none of the people in the U.S. For the various conferences that have been held, the most recent in Nashville just a couple of months ago. I certainly would not be here if it weren't for Lissa, and neither would my daughter Molly and the rest of my family. So thanks especially to Lissa Poincenel. So I think Kevin asked me to join this panel today because of my perspective. And my perspective, my daughter Molly said it just before lunch, over 40 years. As of Labor Day, just this past Labor Day, 46 years I've lived with LHON. So I think I have this dubious celebrity of being the guy with it the longest, and I'll put some numbers around that in a moment. But what I'd like to touch on today is a couple of themes are, number one, family. That word's, I haven't counted, but it's been mentioned many, many times. This room is full of families. The disease is about families, and it's also about teams. And I'm not talking about hockey teams. That's obviously a kind of team, but I'm talking about the team of your own family, the team that you might create at your school if you're at the stage of going to school, or in the workplace, or in other walks of life, and I'll touch on that at the end as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about family and themes, and I'm going to talk about hopefully giving you a bit of optimism, particularly if you're newly affected. In the last 24 hours, I've met at least a couple of people, Ethan and Jamie from Iowa, newly affected. So I'd like to give a little bit of optimism, a little bit of hope, and a little bit of encouragement, especially to people who are newly affected from my perspective, which is many years having been affected. So let's talk about those years. So I was 16 years old, roughly Mark's age, pretty common theme. It was 1972, and you're thinking, whoa, how old is this dude? I'm I'm going to help you with the arithmetic. You take 2018 minus 1972, you add 16, you double it, you triple it, you add 3, 162 years old. Wait, sorry,
I was gonna say,
62.
I got a different
I
number.
carried an extra 1 there, sorry about that. So I am 62 years old. So 1972, I mentioned Labor Day. So, sounds like labor's hereditary optic neuropathy. I had just gotten a new job. I was 16 years old. I had gotten my driver's license at the beginning of August, and I got a new job just starting the school year working at a local swimming pool. And it's Labor Day weekend. I was going to get a lot of hours. It was an hourly wage. For you young people in the room, I think it was $1.30 an hour. So the key was you had to rack up a lot of hours, so I was ready to work all weekend. For my break times, I took a book with me, and I was, would take a break reading the book. By Sunday afternoon, I could not read the print anymore. I knew there was something going on. I had been under the care of an ophthalmologist since I was 7. I wore glasses, and they knew something was going on in one of my eyes. And over that Labor Day weekend, it presented in the other eye. So there I was going into 11th grade in high school, and it was really very, very sudden for me in the second eye. So we were in a quandary just starting the school year on Tuesday after Labor Day. What do we do about this to deal with schoolwork? And that's where this family and team first begins, I think, for me. So I have my family members here today, most of them. I have my 2 sisters, my brother-in-law, my wife, my daughter. My son, unfortunately, couldn't come today. But back in those years, my 2 sisters, my parents helped me by reading to me. So think about that. There wasn't a whole lot of technology back then. There certainly wasn't digital and electronic. The best we could do was magnifying glasses and a tape recorder, a cassette tape recorder. So my parents would read to me at night. They would read my homework to me. And that's how we worked our way through high school. And back then in Canada, some of the older folks will remember there was grade 13. So I had grade 11, 12, and 13 ahead of me. And in about grade 12, my dad said to me, "What are you thinking about for university?" I had not thought about it. I was struggling with high school and doing okay with high school, but I really hadn't thought much about university. So that expectation was there. The task of getting through undergraduate was daunting to me. How would I do that? The answer became a little clearer when I got to Wilfrid Laurier and realized it was informal, but there was a group, here's another team theme, a group of people who would volunteer to read into a tape recorder so that when I got home from classes, the work that I needed to do would be prepared for me on tape. So you learn to listen really well, and that's how I got through undergraduate at Wilfrid Laurier. And about the 3rd year I was there, my dad said to me, "What are you thinking about for graduate school?" There's another theme, and I was not thinking about it. But I did apply. I thought, well, okay, I've heard about a few blind lawyers out there, so that's something I think I'd be interested in. I was interviewed at a couple of different law schools because I think there were a few blind lawyers, but they weren't sure how to handle it because, as you can imagine, a stack of books, pretty high to get through with magnifying glasses and tape recorders. So I did get accepted at Queen's University, and there was a service, I don't know if it still exists, but it was at Trent University, and it was a service with a huge group of local volunteers. Some of them were retired lawyers and judges. Others were people who just wanted to help out. And I ended up buying 2 sets of books, one that I struggled through with magnifying glasses, the other I sent to Trent University, and all of the materials was read into, were read into the tapes that were mailed to me, and that's how I worked my way through. The greatest thing I will say about law school at Queen's was that's where the very first day I met my wife, Mary. So we've been married 34 years, and that's the best part about law school. So I want to go back and just contrast, because it spans over quite a long period of time, just talk about some of the, briefly about some of the treatments, and this theme might be familiar to some people. The Treatments included things like steroids, cortisone, prednisone, lumbar punctures, because they don't know if you have a brain tumor. Not fun. I had 3 or 4 of them, really not fun. And then various non-steroidal treatments, nothing, of course, effective. Again, we're talking late 1970s, early 1980s. The crowning one, and don't cringe too much, but the least fun, even less fun than a lumbar puncture, were the cortisone shots through the lower eyelid to the back of the eye. I had those once a month for about 2 years. Not fun. Nothing effective, and since the 1980s, no sorts of medication or other forms of treatment. Now remember, they guessed at the fact that I might have a disease called Leber's disease. There was no blood test for it back then, so we really didn't know. And as Mark said, I never met anybody else with it during that time. So feeling very alone. None of my family members, as far as I knew, were affected at that time. But I was under the care of my ophthalmologist, a neurologist, Dr. Raymond Bunsick at Hospital for Sick Children.
That's mine too.
Okay, and genetics clinic at Hospital for Sick Children. My doctor, who has since died, Dr. Hausler, he was at Toronto Western Hospital. He said to me, and this is part of the hope and encouragement, and it's becoming more of a reality, I think, today. He said to me, and this, I think, was maybe around 1980, he said, it's not going to be in my lifetime, but it'll be in your lifetime that something will be done about this. The field of genetics is moving very quickly. The thinking is changing very rapidly, and that was his view of the future. And I would say, hearing the doctors and the folks from the pharmaceutical companies today, this is becoming a reality. So very encouraging and good news for all of you in the room. So in 1993, the genetics clinic contacted me and said, there's now a test. It's done at the Emory Clinic in Atlanta. So we took a blood sample, and sure enough, came back as the 14484, like many people in the room. So that was good to know. There was nothing to do about it, of course, no treatment. I go on probably another 20 years after that to 2015. And that's where my daughter said to me, it was summer of 2015, and she said, Dad, I found my daughter Molly, who you heard earlier, she said, Dad, there's this website out there, LHON.org, and they do a monthly phone call, a conference call. You can dial into it. You might be interested in that. So I did dial into it, and that's the first time, other than I have 2 cousins who are affected, a male cousin and a female cousin, who have since been affected at later ages. But I'd never met anybody or talked to anybody with LHON since 1972. And to me, on that first phone call, you've all heard this, we're all in the room kind of hearing this too, because this is the first Canadian meeting, hearing people with similar life experiences and laughing about some of the things that happened to them and sharing stories. So it was really great. And then we attended the 2017 LHON conference in Alexandria, Virginia. And that's where I first met Mark and Kevin's family and a lot of people, and ended up here today. So wonderful, rapid transition in the last few years. Just to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about work life, and then I'll finish with my themes. But I did end up graduating from law school. I decided it wasn't for me. I ended up in the investment field. In 1996, ironically, we moved to Atlanta, and we lived there for many years, and then in 2010 moved to Connecticut. My work has been very rewarding. It's been one thing that has been part of it, because the firms I've worked with have investments in various other countries, in Asia and South America, Europe. I've had to travel, and that, I think, has taught me a number of lessons. So one of the things I'd like to leave you with is a couple of pieces of advice. Don't be stupid like I was. I kind of went through life trying to be stoic, do it myself, and I did a lot of things like that, maybe because I'm a little older now. The thing I would, and it is easier in today's world, people are much more open to helping, but ask for help. And Mark also touched on this. It is a two-way street. You will give back to the people that you ask for help. They will be, for the most part, willing to help you, And there are people out there in the world who you haven't even figured out yet who can be tremendously helpful to you, whether it's in work, your everyday life, whether you're traveling to another country, all of the above. The best thing I can tell you is put a smile on your face and ask for help, and things will work out, whether you're traveling, whether you're trying to get your job done, whether you're trying to get through school, whether you're just trying to get through the grocery store and out to the cash register. Don't hesitate to ask people for help. They will be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, John. That was great. You're doing pretty good for 162.
Is the makeup artist before the video.
I'm also legally blind, though, to be honest with you.
I'll get back at you later.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I'm an easy target, trust me. All right. Dun, dun, dun. Who's next here? Fay, I've had the pleasure of meeting Ida before by phone, not in person, but I haven't met you yet, so I'm looking forward to hearing about your story. So you're up.
We actually have spoken before many years
my
ago.
God, no.
Way to go, Mark.
It was probably like 10 years ago through CNIB.
Oh, well, this is great. Now I'm going to have all these flashbacks. This is good. Okay. Let's take it away.
Before I start, I just wanted to say thank you to the organizers of this event. So I have been diagnosed, well, I have had LHON for September 23rd will mark 10 years for me. And 10 years ago, I couldn't have imagined being in a room with 120 other people that had it. I didn't even know one person for at least 2-3 years. So thank you for organizing this, and I hope to keep meeting on an annual basis and learning more from everybody and all this amazing stuff that's happening in our research world. So thank you. So I'll just quickly go through a little bit of my experience and some stuff that I'm doing today to get through it, because although it has been 10 years, sadly it doesn't get any easier, but it does become easier to deal with and understand. So like I mentioned, my journey started about 10 years ago, and it was similar to other stories I've heard. Mine was very quick. I actually have 2 mutations, and they're both extremely rare. There's only, from what I know, 1 or 2 other people that have each of the others, but not both together. So I have mutation 4745 and mutation 3197. Because of this, a lot of doctors respond with, I don't know, to so many different questions, even 10 years later. But basically, for me, it started on, in the summer. I had returned from vacation down south with a girlfriend from Dominican, and I could remember sitting in the backyard just looking up at the clouds and not being able to make out the fluffiness of the clouds and seeing a bunch of sparkles, and just thinking to myself, like, I was just exposed to too much sunlight and didn't think anything of it. A month later, I'd be starting my last year of university in my specialized degree. So I just kind of let it go until I bought my first textbook. I opened it up and realized I couldn't quite read the tiny font, but although I could still see far, I couldn't read font. So it wasn't making sense to me, and at the time that I noticed it, I was with a friend that was actually wearing glasses, and he's like, here, just put on my glasses and you'll be fine, like just see what you could see. And I put them on, knowing he had a very strong prescription, and I still couldn't see anything. And I looked up at him and I was like, okay, so now I'm getting worried. I can't see anything. So the next day I went to an optometrist who, from all the tests he ran, couldn't figure out anything either. And he said, I'm gonna send you to an ophthalmologist right away down the street. I'll just call her and let her know you're coming. I went to her. She ran a bunch of tests. She stared at me for quite some time, kind of puzzled, not really knowing what to tell me or what was going on. At the time, I was with my sister because I could no longer drive. I was 21, but safely to say, I left the car at home. And I just remember vividly that the ophthalmologist wrote a letter and said, I'm sorry, I can't help you, but you're gonna need to go to the hospital like right now. And she's like, I'm gonna write a bunch of stuff down in this letter, just take it with you and go to emergency, give it to them. She wouldn't tell me what was in this letter. She wouldn't even tell my sister. She just said, let them open it when you get to the hospital. My sister kind of panicked. She's about 6 years older than me. We live in Toronto. We were speeding to the hospital, Sunnybrook Hospital. We got pulled over by cops for going like 40 over the limit. My sister, I was wearing sunglasses. I was teary-eyed from all the drops they had put in to dilate my pupils. My sister was explaining to the cop, I don't know what's going on with my sister. I just need to go get her to the hospital. Here's this letter some doctor just wrote her. Can we please go and not give us a ticket? He read the letter and he actually told us, follow me, I'm gonna get you there ASAP. So now we were even more freaked out, what is happening? This cop is taking us to the hospital. We were bypassing red lights, stop signs, you name it. We get there, immediately we're seeing, we bypass triage. Now I'm freaking out even more. We see a neurologist right away. Within half an hour, I'm through all these different doors. And he's like, we're gonna do a lengthy MRI. We're gonna put you to sleep because it's gonna be about 2 to 3 hour MRI. We wanna scan your whole body. I'm like, oh my God, can somebody tell me what's in this letter? And then they told me, we think you have a possible brain tumor. And I, at 21, didn't know what to think. My sister's crying. At this point, my parents have not heard from us yet, because this had all happened within a matter of 2 hours. We call home. My parents are, midway through the day at work. They couldn't really leave what was going on, but they said, by the time she's done her test, we'll be there, keep us posted. So I went through this MRI, first of probably 6 or 7, and everything came back perfect. So, a bunch of tests kept going on for about a week. They thought I had MS, they thought I had cancer. I can't even explain what different tests I had to do. Long story short, it took them about 2 years to finally diagnose me with LHON. So you can imagine in 2 years, the amount of tests, doctors, specialists, you name it, I saw. Rewinding again at the hospital, they even thought maybe I was high. They thought, this university girl, 21 years old, maybe she's partying at frat houses, what's going on? She's telling us she can't see, but all the test results keep coming back fine. I had explained, I'm not drinking, I've never smoked, this is what I've been seeing the last few days, and they had no answers for me. And they didn't have answers for quite some time until the head of neurology at Sunnybrook finally spoke up and said, look, we don't have any answers, so we're gonna send you to a neuromuscular specialist at McMaster University, who's a professor, and he's the house of I don't know if anybody watches that TV show House. He's house. He will figure this out because we can't. It's been over a year. We just can't. So thankfully, Dr. Mark Tanapovsky and his crew were on it right away. They did a bunch of different muscle biopsies, and the one that was sent to his lab, so a piece of my muscle was sent to 3 different labs. The one at his lab found the first mutation. And they said, okay, we finally found something. We can diagnose you with LHON, and that was about 2 years after the fact. So after that, I just kept doing, yearly testing just to make sure everything was okay, I guess. And because it was so new, they had signed me up for every research project in the book. There's actually a research project, or a paper that was written from Sunnybrook in my name. Somehow it got published because of how rare it was. So it was really interesting going through this. At the time, also not understanding what was going on. No one in my family had it. I was a very rare mutation. I didn't have anybody to turn to for answers, including doctors. They didn't have answers. Everything was really stressful leading up to it. Knowing I was legally blind, but not knowing what caused it, being so young, being in my last year of university, I put a 6-month hold on my university program, went back within the same year, graduated with a specialized honors degree in communications, and then started working for nonprofits, knowing that I wanted to support communities that were struggling or disabled, and wanting to help people in that way. So fast forward 10 years, I still love, supporting people with vision loss, supporting people who have a disability, and I still work in the nonprofit world. I am a full-time marketing and communications specialist. I also run my own blog. I started my own blog about 2 years ago, and it focuses on wellness, because one of the most important things I learned throughout this whole experience was that you really need to take a holistic approach to your life. You can't just be, Fay the blind girl. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's Fay first, blind second. And in order to live like a quote unquote healthy life, you need to be able to look at all aspects of your life, including, your mental health, your physical health, what you're eating, how you're, going about your daily life in order to be to feel whole. At least that's for me. So I started this blog in order to kind of, share with other people my experiences, some of the things that made me feel good. And one of the highlights was food. I figured everybody loves food. Everybody likes talking about food. And if I'm going to live this, holistic and well-inspired life, I want to be able to eat healthy food. So I started becoming a part of all these different food groups online, and meeting with, chatting with different people that had disabilities, but also had this love for food and cooking. And I got to meet so many different people. And one of the most recent things I did was a podcast on how to do things in the kitchen being legally blind. So, how to work a stove, how to fry something, how to boil something without boiling your hand off. So it's been a really great experience for me, and I've met a lot of different people. But just going back to this whole thing of connecting with people online and fostering online communities. I remember when I had first gone legally blind, there wasn't a Facebook group, there wasn't a LHON website, there wasn't those online support groups to turn to. And so when I finally did find the LHON Facebook group, I remember when I had joined it, it was only like 50 people. So you can imagine how much it's grown over the years and how much we're able to support each other. And I remember one day my mom in the evening turning to me saying, and this was probably about just when I had been diagnosed, turning to me and being like, I just saw this boy on the TV. I think he's, from America, and he's in this golf tournament, and he's just phenomenal. And I was like, I think I know who that is. And I was like, was his mom on TV? Is his mom Lisa? And my mom was like, I don't know. I think his name's Jeremy. I was like, yes, I've seen him before on the Facebook group. And I just felt so connected. And I feel like that was one of the first people, even though I didn't know him personally, I felt so connected to him and his family through this online community, just because we had LHON and it was so rare. And knowing that now we're here as a group together in this room, we're sharing this experience. And some of us have been here, 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years. And others, are so fresh, like newly diagnosed this month. But we have each other. Like, I wish I had that 10 years ago. And this is something very special that we shouldn't take advantage of. And so if there is a moment where, you do feel you need help, you need support, you're not getting that at home because people don't quite understand, and they're asking you questions, and you're asking the doctor questions, and nobody has answers, know that now, like today, you actually have people to turn to. And that's something phenomenal, and I'm just personally so grateful for. And yeah, I'm just gonna end it on that positive note, because I think that's, if there's one thing you can leave here today, I know this morning it was very valuable information. It was kind of dense, hard to hear it all in 2 hours, right? Like, it's so informative, but it's amazing. But if there's one thing to leave here with today is knowing that you are not alone. you have support, whether it's from a stranger that has LHON or a family member that has LHON, just speak up and let people know what's on your mind. Because bottling it up, especially if this is something new, it doesn't help, and it just leads to so many other questions, and it leads to so many other insecurities. And especially for the younger folks, like when I was diagnosed at 21, yes, now I'm 31, whatever, 10 years, not much, has changed too much. But like at 21, like I didn't even know what was going on with my life, let alone my health. I didn't know what was going on the next, like tomorrow. So just trying to build your own support system and becoming an advocate for yourself is so important. I'm fortunate enough to have had, a boyfriend that was there for me like through everything, proposing to me a year into my like health journey of LHON, and then us getting married so quickly. We bonded so well over this, and I feel like I have so many things to be grateful for because of LHON, whether it's my job today, my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my friends. It's made everything stronger. So please, know that it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of whatever you're trying to do. It's just finding a different way to do it. And the people that care will be there for you through everything. And if you need to find me online, I'm on everything: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, whatever else. What other, yeah, it's like an old one, but it's a goodie, oldie but a goodie. So you can find me at Fay Knights or at wellnessfirst.net. So that's my website, wellnessfirst.net. You'll find a lot of food stuff on there, healthy food stuff, wellness-related things. So I talk about technology, like health overall. But yeah, you're welcome to reach out to me anytime if you need a friend or just to chat. By all means, private message me on any of those social media channels.
Thank you so much, Fay. That's amazing. A couple notes. One, I'm looking into Pinterest. And number two, you're our new spokesperson, so congratulations. And thank you, Fay. That's amazing. We're the same age, so your story was giving me. It's funny whenever someone speaks, don't you get goosebumps? You're like trying to pay attention, but you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I was there because we were at one point, knowing about a multiple sclerosis or a brain tumor, the feeling, not knowing if what's happening to your life. I can relate. Thank you so much for that, Fay. And Ida, are you ready?
I guess I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ida Davis.
Okay. Is there a microphone here? Oh, no, sorry. I can't. Is there a microphone here?
No, what do I have?
I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I can't see it. So, here we go. All right. Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the organizing committee on the fantastic job they've done in this, getting together this very first LHON Symposium in Canada. And secondly, to say what an honor it is to be part of it. My story. Well, I'm going to quote the title of a book that some of you may have read. Born with a Bomb and Suddenly Blinded by LHON. I, too, was born with a bomb and suddenly blinded by LHON at the age of 67, 6 years ago. I think I just gave away my age, and I'm probably the only person in this room that is this old with LHON. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I wasn't actually going to bring it up, but in 2008, I was working, and I was feeling extremely tired, and I had a few dizzy spells, a few fainting spells. I went to my GP. She kept insisting I have vertigo. She never did take my pulse, though, just insisted, you've got vertigo. Okay. One Saturday, I was out with my daughter, house hunting, one of my favorite pastimes, but I was so tired, and I couldn't even manage to walk around to look at the house. My daughter said, there's something wrong. We ended up in emergency, where I was diagnosed with 3rd-degree heart block and arrhythmia bradycardia. I guess later, putting two and two together, this is probably one of the LHON plus side effects or a correlation. Anyway, I went back to work. At the age of 64, I decided, no, it's time to retire. I've spent 30-some years at the Ottawa Hospital, and I was looking forward to the golden years of retirement where I could look after, or at least help look after my then one-year-old grandson, and take in a lot of travel, which was on the bucket list, get to some of those things around the house that never seemed to get done. You know, that big box of photographs that I was finally going to get them into an album. Guess what? They're still in the box. I did have 2 years of great retirement, did some travel. My husband and I went to Egypt in September of 2011, right after the uprising. In November, I went for, again in 2011, I went for my annual eye exam with my optometrist. Everything was fine, no problem. In December, at the end of December, I thought, gee, I'm not seeing as well as I should be. Oh well, I am probably spending too much time on the computer looking up my next travel destination. Plus it was Christmas, so time is hectic. However, in January, before investing in some new frames, I thought, I'm just going to get her to check my eyes again. Well, she covered my left eye. Oh, everything was fine. She covered my right eye. Oops, where was the big E? There is no E. In fact, where's the chart? I sensed a panic in the optometrist as she excused herself, ran next door to the pharmacy, came back with some eye drops, and made an appointment for the very next day at an eye clinic at the Riverside campus of the hospital. There I was seen for a few weeks by several different ophthalmologists. No one could really figure out what the problem was. Finally, I was referred to Dr. Patel, a neuro-ophthalmologist at the Eye Institute. Dr. Patel has since left and moved on to sunny California. Dr. Patel wasn't really sure either what it was. Was it the start of glaucoma? Perhaps it's optic neuritis. So off I go for the biopsy for optic neuritis. Of course, it was neither. But after all, I did have one eye still that was good, and many people function okay with one eye, and I could still drive. So spring turned into summer, and in July of 2012, I was at a dinner party, and when I went up to the buffet table, guess what? All the food on the table was a gray blur. I couldn't see the food. I felt panicky, excused myself, and somehow I managed to drive myself home. I called Dr. Patel's office, got an appointment the next day, which happened to be a Friday. They fit me in the afternoon. And when he saw me, he kept asking me over and over again, do you have any brothers that are blind? Do you have any brothers? Anyone in your family that's blind? Unfortunately, I could not provide him with this information. I am adopted. I have no biological family history, so that did not help. All I could tell him is, my mother is Jewish, my father is Danish, but that's not what he was looking for. I didn't realize any of this at the time. There's no correlation. So I was whisked down. He asked his staff, please stay on past 4 o'clock. His nurses escorted me down the hall for the usual IV steroid treatment. I was asked to come back again Saturday and Sunday for more IV steroids. And I'm not going to go into detail of all the usual tests that we've all experienced, whether it's, the scans, all that. Well, I'm not even going to list them all. lumbar puncture, etc., etc. So the lumbar puncture, of course, we had to wait for that to come back. And that did not come back until September the 10th. I remember that day vividly. It was actually a day that broke my heart. It was a day I had to tell my family that, yes, there was indeed LHON. I know Dr. Patel had phoned his colleague, Dr. Sadoun, to see if it could possibly be LHON, because I did not fit the criteria of the usual person with LHON. I was female. I was 66, 67 at the time. He did not have any other patients like this. I think Dr. Sadoun thought, I have a feeling it is, but we will not know until the DNA test comes back. So on that day, on September the 10th, I was devastated when I was told yes. I was especially devastated because I had to tell my daughter, who had just given birth 10 days prior to her second son. So you can only imagine the grief and the guilt that I felt having to give them this information. But life goes on. Life, as we know, is filled with challenges. Losing sight and losing most of my independence was definitely not a challenge that I had ever imagined that I would be experiencing. How did I deal with that? Well, like any loss, I went in and out of the usual grieving process, and at times I still do. I was angry, I was depressed, I was in denial. Oh yes, and I bargained. If only I exercised a little more, ate more kale, surely my sight would come back. Of course, it did not come back. And unlike the majority of people with LHON, mine never did stabilize, and I have no sight left. I can detect that bright light that's shining in my face. I can't see anything here. But like everything in life, we have to learn to adjust our sails, and I had to learn to navigate this new world of mine. How did I do that? Well, first of all, with the support of my wonderful family and great friends, with the support from the CNIB, CCB, and of course, the LHON community. And all the great people that I met along the way, people I would never have met, people in the blind community, people I might never have met if this had not happened to me. They are here to support me or support us because they understand, they get it when we have those bad days. And of course, we all have bad days, just like sighted people. But I have to admit, the good days far outweigh the bad days now. And I guess, what does my revised retirement look like? The one that was supposed to be filled with all this travel, etc. I hope to someday still be traveling. But in the meantime, I have attended classes at Carleton, learning and retirement classes, pottery classes, yoga classes, a book club. I've tried my hand at blind curling. I'm trying to learn Braille. I am a CNIB ambassador, and I co-chair a peer support group called New Horizons, New Dreams at the CNIB. And I try to keep up on the latest assistive technology, all with the help of the queen of technology, Miss Kim Kilpatrick, who's sitting at the back. And I don't know what I would do without her help. She's such a wonderful teacher, and she holds our monthly GTT meetings here in Ottawa. And I always leave there having learned something new. In closing, I am going to quote Helen Keller. Alone we can do little, or we can do a little. Together we can do much. And my hope is that with all the research that we've heard about today, and all of us working together in the LHON community, we will definitely find a cure soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ida. I have to say you do quite a lot in retirement right now.
Well-
In fact, I had called CNIB the other day, and they had asked if I had connected with Ida Davis, and I said, absolutely, we have. They said she's our favorite volunteer. So
Oh my.
I would say, Ida, you're continuing to, even though despite how difficult this is, you're continuing to still be involved and impact, and you're putting so many other people before you and what you've dealt with recently, and that's so commendable. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
That really is. All right, where's Kevin? Hey, Kevin, how are you? What do we got on the clock for Q&A here?
I think if there are Q&A questions,
Oh, there'll be Q&A
Oh
questions.
my.
the mics at the back, where the mics are,
Who's on mic control? Oh, who else can be on mic control? I'm just kidding. Oh, Molly's good, yeah. I'm never happy with Alistair, no. Anyone can ask feel free to ask away. You can ask any of us here a question. You saw a hand go up? Whoa.
Hi, for John Knox. Just wondering, how's your vision now? And has it come back to, or what have you taken in terms of medication? And that?
It probably was worse as a teenager, and then in my 20s, I would say it stabilized, and it's been pretty much like that ever since. So, no medication since the 1980s for me. If anybody's got any that will work, I'm open to that.
Got that miracle pill?
Hi, John, you mentioned to put a smile on your face and ask for help. What words do you use when you're asking for help? My son is very hesitant.
I usually just scream out help. No, I think that the trick is, and it depends what level of vision your son may have, but in my case, it's hard to tell sometimes that I have a visual impairment. So that's a trick in itself. And so what I do is I walk up to the person smiling and say, excuse me, I have an eyesight or vision impairment. Could you help me? And so just put it right out there. And amazingly to me, people seem right away to know what that means.